All right, well, we are going to get started. Welcome everyone to High Country Conservation Center's Spring Water Smart Irrigation Workshop. If you're here, that means you are interested in learning more about getting your irrigation system set up ahead of watering season, which is just right around the corner. And if you're like me, you're also here because you care about conserving water through efficient irrigation systems. No matter what, we're glad you're here. FYI, we are recording today's workshop and we will be posting this on HC3's YouTube channel for anyone who was unable to attend today. All right, let's get started. I'm Heather Allen. I'm the Community Programs Director for High Country Conservation Center. Water conservation is a big part of my job here at HC3, along with waste diversion and sustainable food. We're located in Frisco, Colorado, up here in Summit County, and I'm here with my colleague, Kelly. Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name's Kelly Grainer. I'm the Community Programs Coordinator here at HC3, and I'm glad to be joining you all for this wonderful webinar today.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Today you'll also be hearing from a couple of experts from Irrigation Analysis, Bob and Doug Smith. Bob Howie and Doug Smith. They will introduce themselves here in a moment. We'd like to know who you are too. If you can, I'm not sure now, like in this webinar form, if you're able to put in the chat who you are, but if you can, if you'll do your name, who you're with, where you're zooming in from today, and why you're here. And so you're all aware, we've invited a variety of professionals to today's workshop. So we might have landscape professionals on the call, resort and ground staff, HOA board members, water utility staff, or municipal staff involved in water or irrigation management in Summit County. We've also invited those from surrounding regions, so we might have a wide range of folks in attendance. In case you haven't been in a Zoom meeting in a while, I wanted to quickly walk you through the platform. First, make sure you're on mute unless you're called on. And again, like I'm not sure what format we've got you set up, but you are able to also raise your hand, I believe. Otherwise, use the chat or Q&A feature on the screen. If possible, we do ask that you have your camera on so that we can see your face. Again, now that we're in here, I'm not sure how we have the webinar set up. We may not be able to see you. You'll also notice that a lot of our slides have quite a bit of information on them. That's because we wanted to be able to share out this with you after the call so you can reference it as you move into irrigation season. All right, we have a lot to cover, so let's get started. Here are the topics Bob and Doug will be covering today. We're going to make every effort to wrap on time, so I'm going to stop talking, but before I do, pass it over to Bob. We're going to see if we can get this poll launched. Can you launch it? Okay, so we do have some folks on the call. Wonderful. Okay, so we've got some newbies, some of you who are somewhat familiar, quite a few QWEL certified landscaping pros. That's awesome. Great. So that's a great mix. Wonderful. Well, no matter what your skill level or experience level is, we are glad you're here. And without further ado, Bob.
Very good. Thanks very much. Appreciate it. Thank you all for joining this spring refresher, QWEL refresher. Obviously, you can use it for your QWEL CEUs. There'll be more on that later. But yeah, just kind of still snow on the ground up there quite a bit, which is good for water and everything else, of course, for all of us. So, but it's also not too early and actually just around the corner, as y'all know, time to be starting to irrigate. So kind of kind of wanted to start out just kind of stepping back and kind of encouraging you all to, as the slide says, plan ahead, and really kind of almost like thoughts for a snowy day. So the idea with this is really kind of when it's time to, or when you have a snowy day, a snow day, cold day, whatever, where it's cruddy and you're not, going to be out in the field, not out working per se. Just kind of really highly encourage you to take some time and kind of think about the irrigation season that's coming up, that what you're getting ready to launch into, especially for those that are experienced. Like what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do differently? And even more importantly, what am I going to do on our sites, on the sites I'm working on, to reduce my water use? So kind of a lot of bigger questions, but it's sort of like, what failing to plan is planning to fail type thing. So it's really encourage you guys to take, kind of strategize and think about what you're doing with your irrigation systems this year, what you want to do, what you're maybe hoping you can do. Um, those kind of questions, especially you'll kind of look at that list there. What's new? Is there anything new that you're trying to implement or adopt this year on your projects, on your systems? Kind of what's that going to take to do that? As far as, do you need approvals from the powers that be to do some of those things, to get some of those things in place? And it's, again, now's the time really to start that ball moving forward. Um, so, because just as you know, when the season hits, especially in Summit County, it's like, all out. So totally get it, but all the more reason to kind of get ready, get your tools ready, get your equipment ready, get your stock of materials on board, ready to go, and then you can hit the ground running. So, and once you're into it, it's pretty hard to, maybe later in the summer, maybe in August sometime, you get a chance to take half a breath, and then you can maybe get back to some of this. But now's really the time. Um, look at new irrigation technologies that you're thinking about that you might implement. High efficiency nozzles, possibly Wi-Fi or smart controllers, um, all those kinds of things. Rain sensors, and we'll talk more about that later. And some rebates, etc. Also, just make sure areas you're working, that you're up on what the rules are for watering and irrigating. So make sure you're clear on that. Obviously, if you're new to, to all this, you're like, you're drinking out of a fire hose a little bit today. So sorry about that, but definitely ask questions along the way. And all through our presentation today, please do ask questions. So one thing we didn't really do, we kind of jumped in. Doug and I have the company called Irrigation Analysis. We've been doing what we've been doing for 17 years. We help people save water. Usually focus on larger properties, but the same principles apply. And we work with smaller single family homes as well. So that's what we're about. We're not contractors. We're water efficiency and irrigation efficiency consultants, basically. So if you have any questions now, if you have any questions afterwards, please reach out to us. Sorry, kind of should have opened with that, but jump over to the existing properties at the bottom, existing sites. Think about what sites you have that are good candidates for efficiency improvements. So if you know your sites already, you probably know which ones have problems, have issues, have water running down the street, water overspraying onto hard surfaces, all those kinds of things. It's like, basically as professionals, let's, do better. Let's save water, kind of think about those sites and like, how do we fix that? How do we make it better, work right? And you may have sites that are just like kind of a total mess, and it's maybe they should be reinstalled, re-irrigated. And again, you can implement high efficiency aspects when you do that too. But just, take some time, look at your list of sites, look at your job list, shall we say, and then kind of think about where can we do some things, or where do we need to do some things on these coming up for this season. So I don't know. Yeah, you have to sneak off in a closet so your boss thinks you're working or something, but thoughts for a snowy day there. So anyway, appreciate it. Go on to the next. We'll get a little more into it here. So we're just going to run through kind of what you need to do to start up your system. And if you all out there, experienced folks, have any really additional things to add that we missed or other comments, please chime in. And again, you can unmute or go in the chat is fine. So I think the chat's working now. So you can also raise your hand if you want to do it that way, and we can do it. You can ask your question. So anyway, so create a system startup list again with your site list, job list, the sites that you're involved with. Figure out which systems are a priority, and you may already have done that, but maybe it's just like, well, I just have this list, and I guess I got to turn them all on. So probably good to even maybe preview the sites a little bit if you aren't familiar. How big are they? How many irrigation zones do you have? Where do you turn the water off, turn it on? Where's the backflow? Has the rain sensor look like it's, in working order, in a good spot? Does it need some work? Get a look at things if these sites are new to you, or if you have any new sites on your list. But then prioritize them. Which systems need to be on first, and which systems can you turn on first? So some of the plumbing and backflows are inside, so that those can probably go on earlier. Some are in warmer locations, next to buildings or in sunny slope areas, that kind of thing. Some of them are in really cold areas, and so those might freeze up on you, which obviously is a huge problem. So you kind of can't turn those on super early. So but also knowing your customer, know what your bosses want, kind of all that. And yeah, so get a list, get a priority for your systems, and then you can kind of work through it. And then, are there any known systems issues that you have with any of them that are not working or need to be corrected right away? So kind of, oh yeah, we shut that down and a bunch of stuff was messed up, or you knew you had, mainline breaks or lateral line leaks or that kind of thing. Those broken heads, those are good things to kind of go like, we need to jump on that one early. And again, good to start making those repairs potentially. You can go before the system's really fully on even. So are there any high priority system needs, important projects, water wasting or inefficiency issues left over from last year? So again, kind of planning, kind of really thinking about what you're doing. Think before you act is kind of the idea here, and have a game plan. So onward. Still no questions. I mean, anyway, everybody's asleep or yeah. Anyway,
Well,
hopefully.
Bob, let me jump in and interrupt you. I think the
Sure.
way we maybe have set up the webinar might be restricting some hand raising.
Okay.
And so I will say and confirm you can use the chat or the Q&A box to submit any questions. And Kelly is monitoring that, and we can kind of interrupt you if there's anything that maybe wants a more timely answer. Otherwise, we'll try to respond in the chat or the Q&A section.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, good. Yeah, do kind of, this is through the chat and through asking questions and or even making comments, it's super helpful because either you have a question or you have an insight that's really useful for other people to hear too. So if you have any of those, we want it, it's good for us, but it's good for everybody. So, and hopefully we can get your question answered too. So should be able to. Anyway, so again, going on, we got load up, be ready, make sure your truck has all the basic tools, irrigation parts, water meter keys, you got your site maps, irrigation maps, if you have those, kind of know where you're going, have keys to get into, locked areas or, combinations, access codes, those kinds of things. So again, it's just much easier to kind of do that in an organized fashion and do that before, it's like, I got to go do something or there's a problem out there. And how do we, address this? So lots of guys and ladies, of course, do irrigation, you just have a book, a binder or whatever. It's kind of old school, but it's a pretty good way to have everything in one place. So you can flip to the whatever, site you're on. So it's something to think about, or do it digitally, of course. So first day on site, take a walk around, just look for anything obvious. Sprinkler heads laying on the ground, especially where the plows have hit them. Landscape damage that's out there from maybe even vehicles over the winter. Um, make a list or map it, flag it, and then have a thought is to have a startup sheet, a checklist, that kind of thing to kind of again figure out one site's in pretty rough shape and maybe always is. Another site looks pretty clean. Maybe looks maybe deceiving, but kind of get a look at what you've got going. Do a visual check on controllers. Do they show any damage? Do they have power? Is power on? A lot of times they get shut off or they're not, something's happened to the power. Um, do they still have a program or are they programmed up still? Is the rain sensor good, working order, connected to the controller? So again, just kind of checking down the list here. If there's a flow sensor or master valve, are you aware of that and where it's located? Is it, are those things working? Are they wired into the controller? Super helpful if those are on site and working, a really useful tool with one of the smart controllers. Check the backflow preventer. Does it need to be reinstalled? A lot of times people will pull those, have them stored on the shelf somewhere. Do they need to be tested? Kind of get all that figured out. And does the backflow seem to be intact and normal, or does it look like it's damaged and it's going to be something that needs repair right away to get the system on? So next. Again, this is pretty elementary stuff in a lot of ways, but it's also easy to miss a step or skip a step. So that's why we're kind of hitting all this. So on a larger system, you're getting ready to turn the water on, turn on, open the stop and waste, open the backflows, get water in the backflows, open the system up. But on larger systems, think about if there's more than one, main connected to the line. Is it a looped line, they call it, or interconnected? So are there more than one meter serving the main line? And if so, make sure that those are all ready to go, and then you turn them on, more or less together, but one at a time. But they're, you activate both in most cases. So look around for leaks when you do that. If is there water gushing out, or shooting out, which isn't supposed to. I just actually was out in the field today and saw one, 4-foot gusher geyser of water, which is, a lot of water. So anyway, or a little water can be a big waster and cause problems pretty fast too. So really look around. Don't just turn the water on and take off. Take a little stroll and look around. So before you leave, but make sure the backflow is properly installed. Fittings are tight, petcocks are closed, and all the valves are closed on the backflow, but also any of your drain valves, isolation valves are open or closed. However, they should be. Then make sure, your drain caps are on your drip zones, and again, once all these things kind of are ready, then you're ready to really fill up your main line and activate the system, charge the main line. So let's see. All right, next slide's great. I was just looking at the chat, seeing if there was something on there. So you turn the water on slowly. It's not a contest. So you want to do that slowly. And you don't just have this big shot of water and air. Air becomes compressed by the water, and so really kind of can damage things, but also blow pipes apart and things like that. So you turn it on slowly. Doesn't have to be ultra slow, but slowly. So you don't just flip it on and go like, okay, we're great, so because that's going to cause problems. So slowly pressurize the line, or slow to moderate, we'll say, but not full out or wide open. That leads to problems a lot of times. It should start, you should notice it start, feel it or hear it stop flowing, and then it start flowing, and then it will stop because basically the line is full. There may still be air in it, of course, but it's it's pressurized, and you can, once you know that it's pretty much at that point, you can open it all the way up. So and if you do feel like this has been going for longer than it seems, then you need to kind of, again, be looking around for water that is flowing. So something's open, something's leaking, and definitely don't leave the property, and have water flowing, and you didn't look around or, weren't sure about that. So, because you can, walk away and get a phone call, or, a big problem can evolve from that quickly. So, and waste a ton of water. So if there's no leakage, no water is flowing, yeah, then you can open the backflow, and starting with the farthest valve upstream, or farthest upstream valve first. So, again, get the air and all that out. And then once you feel like everything's, kind of on and fairly stable, then it's time to move on to a full system check and inspection. Now I'm going to pass it off to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Doug Smith.
All right, good morning, everyone. All right, well, since the water is now on, and we're going to jump over to the controller and look at the electrical portion of the system. So the first thing you really do is you go to the controller, open the panels, make sure that there's power on. I always check for the spider webs and bugs and things that may have nested in there over the winter. Just brush them out, make sure that it's clean. You don't want anything on the wiring or the contacts or anything like that. A lot of times the cabinet itself can be dirty, and so I just take kind of a damp cloth and clean everything off. Just try to get it into an operable condition. Wiring, of course, is whenever the freeze thaw, the wires can become loose. So you just want to make sure that those are all tight. You can take a small screwdriver and check the terminal strips, or give them a little tug just to see if anything's moving or not. Check all the other sensor inputs and so forth. And this says check the rain sensor installation and operating condition. So you experienced irrigation techs out there can probably look at this controller and identify whether this has a rain sensor installed or not. I'll give you a second to look at that, and I'll come back and tell you here in just a second for those that don't know. You're going to check for the master valve and flow sensor installation if they exist. So there will be terminal inputs on most controllers for those. And if there's no wire there, then they most likely do not have one installed. So does this controller have a rain sensor installed? The answer would be no. And how I can tell is that if you look where the probe is on the controller, the black probe to the left of that is a little yellow wire loop. Well, that's a bypass. So I can look at that controller and immediately tell you that there is no rain sensor installed on that controller. So that's one of the things we look for. And if you see that there's not one, it's always a good idea to install a rain sensor. That way, of course, when it rains, you can set it so that the controller interrupts irrigation. We use natural rainfall as irrigation, and then we're not using supplemental water needlessly. All right, so then there's conducting an ohm test. And why would we want to do that? Well, a volt ohm meter or a multimeter are an extremely valuable tool, and any irrigation tech should have one of these on their truck. This is a digital one here. We used to use analog in the old days, but mostly they're all digital multimeters now. And you can do a lot of things with this. So just by checking the resistance of each zone, that can tell you kind of the condition of the wiring and or splices and solenoids. So you can kind of see the reading on there is 29.96. And that would be the resistance of the solenoid going on the control valve. And generally speaking, your ohms readings are going to be between 25 and 50. And it just kind of depends on the brand of the valve, how far the valve is from the controller, wire sizing, things like that. But that's kind of the general range between high and low would be 25 to 50. So if you have one that's reading like 4.5 M, which is a huge amount of resistance, then there's probably a failing solenoid or a failing wire splice or something like that. And then you'll just have to kind of use process of elimination to find where that error is. On the other side, if it's like a 1 ohm or a 0.5 or 0 even, then that indicates a short. And generally, if you have a short, you're going to blow a fuse. So unless you have an open line, if it says OL, which is open load, that means you have a complete break in the line. So it could be disconnected, or it could have been severed somehow, maybe with a shovel at some point or something like that. So anyway, an ohms test is it tells you a lot. It's a great tool. You can also use it to test voltage. And so with that, you can test whether or not the controller is putting out voltage on the zones. So if you have one zone that's not working, everything else seems to be working. You know that the valve is working because you've gone out and operated it manually. Then you can come out or come back to the controller and check to make sure that the controller is putting out the 24 volts on that zone. So sometimes one station will go out in a module. Sometimes the whole board will go out, but you'll know pretty quick if you don't have any voltage at all going out. And then of course you want to check your 120 volt coming in. If there's no display, then you probably don't have any power coming in from your AC, so you'd want to check that. All right, so you just kind of look at the controller. This is it's a solid state controller, but it is kind of an older one. Do you want to take the time to upgrade that and maybe put in a weather-based ET type controller? There's a lot of those available on the market today, and they'll look at different sources of weather and evapotranspiration, which is ET, and then they can make runtime adjustments or scheduling adjustments based on the weather. So these are pretty helpful, especially in the shoulder seasons when it's cooler and we don't need to water as much. And so they can automatically make those adjustments for that cooler weather in spring and fall, and then water appropriately when it gets hot during the summertime. Next, please. So once the controller is operational and everything seems to be working good, you'll want to do what we call a wet check. And a wet check is simply an irrigation, call it a test or an evaluation. So you can set up a program for every zone, every station to run. I'll use zones and stations kind of interchangeably, but a station refers to an output on the controller, and a zone is basically the area that the sprinkler heads are covering out in the field. So kind of the same thing, but I mean, there could be some semantical difference, if that's a word, some difference between the zone and the station, but mostly they're interchangeable. All right, so you can set up a program to run every zone. Some controllers have test programs for this specifically, so you can just put in however many minutes you want, and then you'll get it started and you'll walk around and inspect the site. So you're just looking for anything that's not working properly. You're looking for leaks, of course, broken heads, things that aren't working. And then there's a note here that says have some flags and a Sharpie ready. And so that's great because then you can mark on a flag, stick it in the ground where the problem is. And that way your tech can come back later and say, oh, here's a broken head, or here's a lateral leak, or here's a clogged nozzle or something like that. And then they'll be able to fix it. They'll find it and then fix it easily. So that's pretty helpful. So you continue to go through. One of the other things too is you may have a timer. So especially on systems that have a lot of zones or stations, because when you get in there and you get sidetracked, or somebody comes up and starts talking to you, or something doesn't come on and it's on the other side of the property, you can kind of lose track of what station you're on. So you can use a timer. They have lots of apps to do that, and you can, so that way you can just look at your app and determine what zone you're on or what zone you're supposed to be on. So that's helpful for me when I'm in the field a lot. So you continue to do that, look for anything that needs to be flagged and do so. And then after that's completed, you can just make a list or, of your highest priorities. So obviously lateral leaks and broken heads are going to be your biggest water wasters. But you just want to make sure that, everything is going to be repaired in a timely manner. Also, it would be a good time if you don't have a zone map to make one. So again, you can do a Google image on a piece of paper and then mark it on there with highlighters or however you want to do it, and even laminate it and stick it in the controller. Or there are, again, apps like GPS apps that you can use to access it. But with that, you don't really have anything in the controller. So it's always good to kind of have a hard copy in the controller so that if someone walks up, they can open it and say, okay, zone 1 is right here, and it's going to be a turf zone or something like that. So zone maps are huge help. Zone list is essentially, you'd have kind of the same information, but more in a spreadsheet format almost, where you could have zone 1 is a turf zone and their pop-ups. They have traditional sprays or whatever information you want to put there, locations of it as well. So those are both very helpful. It's a good time to do that now if you don't have those already. So again, you're identifying the most immediate repair needs. Broken heads and lateral leaks are the worst culprits for water loss. Not only can they lose a lot of water, but they can also damage other hardscapes. They can, wash soil away on plant material and things like that. So you want to get those fixed pretty quick. And then you just get into the basic adjustments. So we just adjust the heads and nozzles to eliminate the overspray. Sometimes those can change over the winter. You never want to spray onto pavement or buildings if you can avoid it. Buildings especially, there's no reason to ever spray a building. Pavement, sometimes you can't avoid that if it's kind of a curved pathway or something like that. And, you can't really get a curve perfectly with the spray head or any kind of spray. So anyway, you just try to avoid that as much as you can, best you can. Replace the nozzles to properly size. So a lot of times we will see nozzles that are way too big for the area. And so that can create a lower distribution uniformity or DU. So you just want to make sure that the nozzles they fit the area and the spacing of the heads that are in there for optimum coverage. So that's pretty important. Raise and straighten heads. What we see a lot are heads they appear sunken. So they're too low in the ground. And so when they pop up, they're not clearing the grass or even the dirt sometimes. And anytime that spray pattern is disrupted, then your uniformity drops. And then what happens is you'll end up having dry spots and wet spots. And then you try to compensate for the dry spots by turning up the controller, and then you have soggy spots. So really the best thing to do is to raise and straighten those heads to get them above that ground cover. And once again, you're checking your drip filters. I think we mentioned that before. That seems to get overlooked a lot. So if you check your drip filters, look for any debris in there. If there's debris in there, there may be some that got past the filter. So it's probably a good time to locate the flush valves if they weren't open when you did the water turn on, and open them now and just flush that out and make sure that all the debris is out before you close it up. And that'll help all your drip emitters kind of stay healthy and clear. All right, so then we get into the scheduling, and this is kind of the big part because there's two ways to do it. You can have most of your older controllers are essentially on-off switches. So they're clocks or controllers or different names like that, but they all do one thing. They turn on, and then after it's a timed, designated time, they just turn off. So it's really just a timer. You can tell it when to turn on and off, which makes it nice. But with the weather-based controllers, now we can adjust those automatically based on the weather. So that's a pretty big advance in controller technology. The controller you see here is a pretty old one. It dates back to the 1900s probably, like late 1900s. But anyway, it's just, again, it's an on-off switch. It might have two programs in there. There's no remote access to it. You can't really do a lot with it, but it's just an old timer. And so it's an old timer. So you can see all the station wires in there. So there's probably 24 or 30 stations in this one. So there's a lot going on here. And if you have a system that's large like that, you can probably gain a lot by putting in a new smart weather-based controller. It gives you remote access. You can operate it remotely. You can do a lot of things. You can get alarms and alerts if things aren't working properly. So a lot of good things there. But in order to program all of these controllers, what you really need to know is what your system is. So we kind of talked about the zone map and the stations. If you don't have that information, you really do need that in order to program your controller properly. So even more than, well, this is a turf zone and it's a rotor head. Well, that's got a distinct precipitation rate on that zone. So in order to determine what a runtime is, you need two things really, or three things. You need to know your weather or your ET, and that's how much water you have to replace. you have to know what your precipitation rate is, and that's how fast the water is applied to that area. And then also the kind of the efficiency or the uniformity of that zone. So that's kind of the makeup factor where you have to overwater essentially to cover a dry spot. So really the two that I focus on first are the ET and then the precipitation rates. You can calculate a runtime from that. So how do you know what your precipitation rates are? Really, the most accurate way is to do a catch cup test. Known as that's kind of an irrigation audit where you can collect all the water in the cups and then that you can determine what your uniformity is and your precipitation rate. But we all can't run out and drop cups all over, so you can do it theoretically as well. So it's based on the nozzles, the area, and how much water they flow. So there's formulas for that. We're not going too much deeper in that today in this seminar. But if you look in your catalogs of all the manufacturers, most of them have a chart that kind of give you a range of what that nozzle at a certain spacing will apply. So with that, you can calculate a precipitation rate. And again, you can calculate your runtime. And this is important because if you just put 15 minutes on every spray zone and 30 minutes on every rotor zone, well, some are going to water too much and others are going to water too little. And it's just not a great or accurate way to program your controller. And especially when you get into the smart controllers, because a lot of them have areas where you can put that data in. And so you can be very specific as far as microclimates. So you see the bullet point there is the zone, sun or shade. Is it sloped or flat? Soil types, all those things you can put in some of the newer controllers, and that will help determine what that precipitation rate is, and then what the runtime should be based on the plant material. So pretty important, all that stuff right there. Okay, we generally don't want to irrigate more than 3 days per week during the midsummer, excluding annual flowers. They tend to be thirstier on a daily basis. The reason that we don't want to water more than 3 days is because what this does is it promotes deep, infrequent watering. And that helps to get your root structure deeper into the soil. So if you were to water just a tiny bit every day, your roots are going to go where the water is. So you're not getting very much water down into the soil profile. And so your roots are just going to sit right on the surface. So we really want to, for a healthy plant, we really want those roots to go down into the soil. So you'll water a little bit more, but more or less frequently. So you want that water to cycle and soak into the soil, and then that will help promote deep root growth. And so that's why we really don't want to water more than 3 days per week. That really helps the roots. Another important part too is knowing what your allowed days are. So some water providers will have different allowable water days. So you'll have to work around that as well. And I don't know, did you want to click on this and kind of show that a little bit, Heather?
Yeah, because what's cool is it's not necessarily based on your water provider, but like we worked with the different towns and water providers to kind of come up with this unified watering schedule based on the address. So either the address of the business or the home that you're working for, and that kind of determines what 3 days of the week you should be watering. And then I know you'll say this, but like watering overnight. I think one thing too that I'm recognizing is not in the presentation, but if you go to High Country's website, it's got well information, I believe. So if you are working with a system that runs off of a well, I guess that's a possibility. Just make sure that they have outdoor water permits. So that's all I'll say. But yeah, this information is on the HC3 website.
Great. Another important schedule to understand is your mowing and maintenance days. So when you're irrigating, if you know that the crews are going to be out there the following day, you may not want to water the night before, just so that there's no wet spots or anything like, not wet spots, but wet turf is hard to mow. So you want to make sure that it has a chance to soak in and dry out before they're out there. And also if you're doing a site inspection, if the maintenance crew's out there and they're mowing that day and you have a schedule to go check the irrigation, it can be kind of cumbersome to work around each other. and you don't want to get anybody wet unintentionally. Sometimes they don't like that. Other times it's okay. But anyway, you just want to make sure that everything's coordinated so that you're not, fighting with other people to access the site, I guess. Irrigate at night, but always between 6 p.m. and 9 a.m. That's just really for evaporation. Watering during the day is not efficient just due to that. When the sun is blaring down on the soil, evaporation is probably the number one factor in evapotranspiration. So that's the evaporation portion of it. So watering at night just allows that water to soak into the soil. It's also when people aren't around. So if you're watering at 10 a.m. or 11 a.m., that park or whatever is being watered may be being used by people doing whatever sports or activities or recreation or whatever they're doing. So you don't want to water when people are out using that as well. So that's considering the timing there. All right. So after you've done all this and you want to look at the system itself, consider any irrigation upgrades that would help the system become more uniform and more efficient. So what's lacking with the system? What could we put in there that could help this become more uniform and more efficient? Is there anything that's working or not working? So one of the things we see a lot are mixed heads on zones. So we'll see rotor heads with spray heads stuck in there, or the rotary stream nozzles with different rotor heads. So they all have different precipitation rates. And that's kind of what I went back to a minute ago, was with the precipitation rates and the uniformity. So all those different nozzle types have different flow rates and they have different precipitation rates, and it will really affect your uniformity as well. So try not to mix those. There are some cases where you can, if you understand what your uniformity is and you've got a specific area what you're trying to fill. If you do it correctly, you can do it. But then it's probably wise to have a note in the controller that says station 5 is this way because of this, so that someone doesn't look at that and say, oh, what are these people doing? There's all these mixed nozzles on there. So you can do it, but it's generally something you don't want to do unless there's a specific problem you're trying to fix there. So the uniformity portion is pretty important. What else can be done? You've got smart controllers. I am a big proponent of flow sensors and master valves, especially with the smart controllers that can read flow. And then if you have a break in the line, it can recognize that. It can send out an alert. It can shut down the system. There's a lot of things that it can do to save water if you have a flow sensor installed. So that's always a great idea. A lot of them can be retrofitted fairly easily as well. So it just depends on the system. If your controller is close to your point of connection, you can just cut in a master valve and flow sensor, and it's a great tool to have. There has been a lot of improvement on spray nozzles over the years, like in the last 10 or 15 years. So there are they're called high efficiency, but really they're high uniformity nozzles that you can replace just by unscrewing one and screwing another on. The MP rotator, I'm going to throw brands out. The Rainbird R-Van, I think K-Rain has some of these stream rotary nozzles. So they're like a thin stream that rotates. And those are really uniform. They're really good. And then they can also, because they have a kind of a wide options, I guess, of distance of throw. So you can really fix a lot of stretched spray nozzle zones with these nozzles and improve the uniformity there. So it's kind of a good nozzle to go in and retrofit. It does lower your precipitation a lot. So one of the comments we get back from the field is that the runtime becomes too long, and then it becomes a programming issue, I guess, because you'll want to keep your water window as short as possible. But in order to do that, you would need to run 2 zones at one time because your flow is decreased and so forth. So not every controller can do that, but there are obstacles to overcome when you're changing your nozzles out. And you just have to be aware of those in order to get the benefit out of that. So what other ones would there be? The rain sensor. So we saw that controller a while ago that did not have a rain sensor. I'd install those. The same thing with the rain sensor. There's a lot of complaints from field techs that they don't work because they'll go off, but then they come on right away. And after studying those for quite a few years, it's really our climate is really dry. And so the rain sensors are essentially a stack of cork material that expand when they're wet and it breaks a contact. And then they dry out real fast. And so then they just, this appears that it doesn't work. So there's a couple of things you can do. On most of the rain sensors, there's a little hat on there or an adjustment where it tells you when or how much air can go through there. So you want to shut that all the way down if it's available, and that way it'll retain as much moisture in there. At least you can generally get one day out of it. I know that Rainbird makes one that's got an automatic 48-hour um, delay so that when it gets wet, it'll, you can set it for how much water will trip it. Once it trips, it'll turn off for 24 or 48 hours. So that's another way to get around that. But always a good thing to have. Use rainfall when you can, and then less water to our potable systems. All right, so we kind of went over these a little bit. We'll just hit these bullet points. Raise and straighten heads. Again, raising heads is one of the highest. An old nozzle will work better than a new nozzle that's buried. So if you have an old nozzle that's at the proper height, that's better than a new one buried. So get your heads up to grade. Replace traditional spray nozzles with high efficiency nozzles. Adjust and correct overspray. Check valves is another one. So if you have a lot of heads where they have low head drainage, and that's easy to identify because the water will just be pouring out of a head after the valve is off. So we want to try to keep all that water in the pipes so we're not constantly refilling the pipes. So check valves can help with that. New controllers, rain and freeze sensors, master valves, flow sensors are all good. Make your wish list and create a proposal for your clients and tell them they can save water if they put you to work. There are also rebates available from HC3 that can help with the costs and offset some of those. The season's short up there, and so you don't have a lot of time to get things done, but now's the time to kind of start thinking about that, like Bob said early on, and start trying to get everything implemented and be efficient.
Yeah, as Doug just mentioned, HC3 does offer rebates for homeowners, residents, single family homes, as well as commercial locations. So that could be an HOA or business. So if you're working with someone as a landscaper, or if you are an HOA board member, just know that depending on what type of equipment you are upgrading, you can get money back from HC3. So there is a process where you have to kind of get a professional assessment through Irrigation Analysis or through another professional, and then kind of show proof of upgrades. But yeah, we do offer money back. And again, all of this money is on our website. I think we have, oh, well, we'll have a QR code coming up where you can learn more. But yeah, I think for the purpose of this call, just know that there is money available if you or your client is interested but can't afford or doesn't want to spend all of the money, there is money available. Bob, you're on mute if you're talking.
There we go. Sorry. Thank you very much. Anyway, we're talking, this is another kind of more and more a trend for sure is consider changes of high water use turf, the bluegrass, fescue, those kind of things that are taking lots of water and I mean, they use, they really require, double, triple, even quadruple like what native type plant material needs. So really looking at areas of non-essential turf. That's kind of the big buzzword. It's in the middle there of this slide. And kind of it's like, how do you know if it's non-essential? It's kind of like if the only time anybody's ever on it is to mow it or to maintain it, that's pretty non-essential. So, definitely peripheral areas, the sides or the backs of properties. But, sometimes, front and center. looking to, just move away from heavy water use, and especially if water bills are, kind of costly, there's, expensive, or you have problems, and you need to do some irrigation changes anyway, modifications, reworking, then it's great time to say, do we really need all this grass, and should we move on to something else? So, yeah, the hot, dry slopes are another area. Either, those are another area that takes lots of water to keep those green and looking good. Cool, shady areas, not so much. Those are areas maybe it's like, yeah, the grass is growing here and we don't have to water it very much. It's like not as beneficial to convert those kind of areas, but certainly could still do that if you wanted to. So, um, there's you can either convert to like a native grass. That's kind of typically the least expensive conversion, most cost effective in a lot of ways. It may not be the aesthetic that you need or want there, but that's definitely, kind of a good way to go. Takes a little time for that to grow in and get established. But you can also definitely move, from high water use turf to low and moderate water use plant material. And there's a great list of those for Summit County on the town of Breckenridge's website. You can dig around for that and find out good trees, shrubs, and perennials for low water use. And they really geared towards, that list is geared towards Summit County specifically. So take a look at that, and look at areas of your landscape that it's like we just have too much grass. It's not very, it's just green, it's nice, but it's like, can we get some color and get some shrubbery and trees and do some other things in here? So make it, get rid of the non-essential turf areas. So state, if you have a big areas, like larger property in big areas, there's grants through the state even that are available to help in that process financially. So, yeah.
And I'll just plug HD3's website again. We do have, since I have it open, you go to our water page, Transform Your Grass. It's got some DIY tips for converting to low water native grasses and plants as well. I think timing wise, maybe we skip the poll. If you're going to do anything different, hopefully no one said they tuned out 45 minutes ago when we were struggling with technology at the beginning there. But yeah, so I think, Bob, were you going to cover this QWEL CEUs?
Yeah. So if you are QWEL certified currently, you need to annually update and renew with QWEL. It's actually, we got some confusion in our slide here, I just noticed, but it used to be free to do that. It is no longer free to do that. If you go to the QWEL site, QWEL.net, and put in your information, it probably is going to say, okay, we need your CEUs, your credits. You need to have 2 CEUs, as it says there in the top paragraph, each calendar year. And one of which needs to be related to efficient irrigation, which that would count as today. But then you need another irrigation related CEU they want to see, so that they just know you're engaged in, and you're staying up to speed, up to par, and kind of in the game on irrigation and being efficient with water use. But as you see on stat number 4 down there, it's a $20 annual renewal fee that you need to pay to QWEL is kind of the new thing. And I believe that, I don't think it's free. I don't know when the transition or changeover is, but you just go straight to QWEL.net. And if you have any questions, they should be able to answer those as well. So, but anyway, so yeah, QWEL has to, it's pretty nominal fee to maintain a certification. So I encourage you guys to do that. Stay engaged there. So. Good.
All right, and then we'll be sending out a survey after this, just to get feedback in general on the content of the presentation. And if you complete the survey, you'll be entering also for a chance to win a $50 Lowe's gift card. So we hope that you will take that survey when we email it out after this event. Here is the QR code that I mentioned earlier. If you scan it right now, it'll take you to HD3's website to our irrigation page to kind of walk you through the process of helping either yourself or your customer get some money back, either on a irrigation assessment to kind of determine what is going on with their equipment to see if it's as efficient as it can be, and then also if you decide to go with upgrades. And lastly, just our contact information. Bob and Doug are the water irrigation experts. HC3 is the water conservation rebate folks. So you have our contact information, and again, we'll be sending this out, and you can also find us on the interwebs. Any last words from Bob and Doug or Kelly?
No, appreciate you guys attending, and just again, think about how to be efficient in your water use, how to use less water, and not waste water. So that's your charge from me for 2025.
Amen. I like that.
Yeah.
Great note to end on. Yep. Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Bye.